Hello and welcome to the FDT-TV podcast. We've been away for a week because of the international break, and as Harry Redknapp says, no one really cares. Can't wait for the Premier League to get back, but we are back, and I am joined as always by Mr. Hawes himself. How you doing?
Yeah, good mate. You all right?
Yeah, it's all fine and dandy. West Ham did not lose this week, so it's all fun, isn't it? Really, but. Some major bits of news before we get going. England have a new top goal scorer in Harry Kane. We'll get into that a bit later in the show. Everton possibly being deducted points for financial issues. And Tottenham have mucked it up again when Daniel Levy has got rid of another manager. All of that to come, plus some predictions and a little bit more into what's going on in and around football. But very firstly, good English there. We're not a literature podcast. We are a football podcast, and no one really cares about that. Ben Foster, the man who was serving goal for Watford last season, Premier League keeper, after 18 years, has now returned to non-league Wrexham to help them see out their season and try and get promoted into League Two. The GoPro's back in the goal. I've already watched the video. It was good fun. Ryan Reynolds slid into his DMs apparently and asked him to help out, and he's gone and done it, being paid quite a modest wage. But yeah, for a goalkeeper, he's getting on a bit, but quality goalkeeper will certainly boost him around. Also bring a bit more of a few more eyes, I should say, to Wrexham, who are already doing really, really well. I think they've got like 97 points, I think, with a game in hand, sitting top of the National League. So, yeah, I think they're going into League Two next year. But yeah, what do you make of that signing? Would you be happy with Ben Foster if you was a Wrexham fan?
Yeah, I think there's no denying his quality. A very experienced goalkeeper, as you mentioned, been around the game for a long while, but I think you mentioned something about the wages. Obviously, he's got his credibility or his reputation as a fantastic keeper. I believe possibly capped by England a few times as well.
Was, yeah.
May have only been very few caps, obviously, given the goalkeeper situation. But yeah, previous England goalkeeper. What can you not like about him? He's probably one of the nicest guys in football, so I've heard. Mm-hmm. Has got his own podcasts. Very funny guy. Yeah, I think as a Wrexham fan, you can only be pleased with that, getting that wealth of experience, because not only with him do you get the Premier League experience about being in goal. Obviously, they wouldn't have been in a position that they were in for just any old reason. So be able to organise the back, and I know you just mentioned that they're not doing too badly this year. I definitely think with the takeover from Ryan Reynolds as well, there's been some boosting into Wrexham's global brand. Obviously, they've had the stuff on the Disney Channel as well, which has possibly created a few what would be unknown fans, obviously now being able to access like an access all areas type of affair with Wrexham. Yeah, it can only be a good thing. For the rest of the season, as you said, yeah, not a bad shout at all. Not a bad shout.
And so that's quite good. What's not so good is Everton. Had two complaints put into the FA about them from, if I am correct, Leeds and Burnley about their financial affairs, and they're now being looked into, and it looks like they may be docked some points, which I think is a little bit unfair in the sense of if it gets done this season where Manchester City's, who apparently have already been charged, is going to take 4 or 5 years. Now, from what I can understand and read, they're saying that there's financial irregularities. Now, Everton have spent a lot of money. We understand that. That's not been hidden. But what is caused them to potentially fall foul of financial fair play rules is the lack of income from ticket sales during COVID, and the fact they're pumping 500 million into a new stadium. So I think once Goodison Park is sold, that it will level it all up and it will all become fine. But it's whether that they're allowed to sort of push on and do that later down the line. But I mean, my question to you would be more along the lines of, should they be given the same treatment as Manchester City, or is it a case that they should be innocent until proven guilty, or do you think just take some points off them so West Ham don't go down? I mean, what's your take on it?
Well, as the friend that I am, I think the only thing that I can say is to deduct them now as in your best interest. I think would be the only option that we have to take. But if I was to take my neutral hat off, put my neutral hat on, and think about this seriously, I think they need to be given the same sort of timescales as Manchester City. It can only be fair. I suppose it would depend on their legal team and all this sort of stuff, their accountants and stuff, how good they are about kind of causing blockers and stuff like that, because obviously Manchester City have got a wealth of financial backing behind them, that they may be able to just go, look, we're still doing our investigations, give us a bit of time, blah 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 blah. But yeah, I think it would be extremely harsh if they were to be given a points deduction in this season. I'd say, depending on the wealth of evidence that they have, it may be something that they can throw the book at them, I suppose. Whereas I know we mentioned a couple of weeks ago that there was some accusations about Manchester City where you said that the charges had already been dropped, I think it was. So
some of them had,
I think it really depends on the wealth of evidence that they've got against them. But if you're setting a precedent by the terms of Manchester City, I think they can only be considered in the same sort of light and give them a bit of time. Or if a points deduction does come into play, then look to do it in the new season.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a long time since there has been a points deduction in the Premier League. Or I don't know if there has. I mean, I think the last that I can think of may have been Luton, but I don't know if they were in the top flight at that point. Still, I mean, more, I say justifiable punishment, but that's not the right word. I think the more likelihood is like a transfer ban, a bit like Chelsea had, and a fine. I think that's more likely to be the case. I mean, West Ham, we had to pay Sheffield United a certain fee, didn't we, for our transfer misdealings? It wasn't about financial irregularities. It was more about the way in which players were bought through third parties, which changed the rules slightly. But yeah, that's all up in the air at the minute. I mean, it would be a shame for Everton to go down, especially with their new stadium coming along. Obviously, they've got Sean Dyche in charge. You can see they're making progress, and I think give him a couple of years, and they will be a real team to worry about. Certainly, sort of battling into that top half of the table. But do they go? If they go down, you could see them crumble a little bit like some of the bigger teams in the past. Your Sunderlands, your Boltons. The Championship is an extremely hard place to get out of, especially if some of your players would probably want to leave, and the fact that the manager's not the manager, the owner's not really invested in it anymore. So yeah, it could be an interesting time for Everton going forward. I'm sure there'll be some nervous fans up north, waiting to hear what happens with that. And then finally, I'm not sure if it's positive or negative. I think it's positive for Tottenham fans, but negative for everybody else, because it probably means they're going to do a bit better. But as you can see by the thumbnail, Conte has been sacked. The 11th manager sacked this season in the top flight. And I think he's happy to go, if I'm honest. I don't think he held back on his sort of last interview, saying that Tottenham are set up for failure, they're not setting up for winning. Sort of throwing mud at the board, throwing mud at the players, saying they're not here for the fight, they're just here for the payday. And and sort of agreeing with Richarlison that they've been a bit shit this season. You can't say that he's wrong, but he's number 2 who's worked with him for a long time. He's taken charge in the interim between now and the end of the season, and he done fairly well when Conte was out. Do you think it's a case more the players were fed up with Conte, or do you think it's a case where Daniel Levy hasn't backed him in the way that he wanted, same as Mourinho, and then gone, he's had a falling out, I'm not going to do it, I'm going to throw you under the bus, I'm going to throw everyone under the bus, and they've parted ways because of that. So what do you take on? What's your take on him being sacked? Is that a good decision for Tottenham or bad? Let's start there.
In terms of the integrity of the club, again, I'm trying to be as neutral as possible. So, with regards to the integrity of the club, regardless of what your feelings are about a given situation, I get obviously with the manner in which the results came. So losing in the Champions League and then throwing away a 3-1 lead over Southampton for them to claw it back to 3-3. I can understand why he would be frustrated, and obviously given the results that he had, I'd say over the course of the season, it's been a bit hit and miss. And then obviously at those times where he was in hospital recovering from surgery and all this sort of stuff, you did see a bit of improvement with him being out of the picture. Now there are conversations that I've been listening to today in terms of, do you think at the time that he was out, it was kind of like out of sight, out of mind? Do the players have a chance to kind of relax a little bit because they're not, or they don't understand his philosophies and all this sort of stuff? So I think it could be a bit of column A and column B, but just to expand on the point, in terms of the club's integrity, you can't be having members of staff, regardless whether it's the kit man, the ball boys, the cleaning staff, the managers, you can't have them coming out in the type of forum that they are and bringing your club into disrepute. I think he's not the first person to say it, and by no means is he going to be the last person to say it, but I think for all parties is probably the best decision. Because obviously Daniel Levy wants to keep his reputation. He's obviously enjoying the way he's running the club. It's making money. The fans are unhappy with the style of play that Conte's bringing. The results aren't coming. They were expecting, obviously, with Pochettino to kick on to another level, then with Jose Mourinho to bring him up to another level. When Antonio Conte come in, serial winner, he was the best thing since sliced bread. Definitely going to finish above Arsenal again. Definitely going to win a trophy, and it's not worked out. So I would say that the players must have to take some responsibility for that, regardless of their thoughts and feelings towards the manager at the time. At the end of the day, you're being paid a contract. And it does frustrate me, and I've said this numerous times, that the players, or it's the manager that kind of has to brunt or bear the brunt of everything that goes wrong. When they're winning, everything's amazing. The manager's the best thing since sliced bread. When the manager's losing or the players aren't putting a shift in, then it all comes down to the manager, because the manager's the ones that pick the team, they watch the training sessions, etc. So I think the players have to accept some responsibility, regardless whether they give a shit or not. They've not been pulling their weight, but at the same time, you could see it coming, I suppose. Not possibly to the extent that it was coming, because I know there was the contract discussions that they had a few weeks ago, and I say a few weeks ago, during the January transfer window. So his contract was going to be up. Daniel Levy said, if you sign a new contract, we'll give you funds, and he was like, well, no, you give me funds and I'll sign a contract. So there was obviously a disagreement there, and I think it's been going on for a while. And it's just come to a boiling point. So I think it's probably best for all parties.
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, it was by mutual consent. There was no sacking of such. They both decided it was best to part ways. But it sort of cut and paste for me a little bit in the same sense as Mourinho. You've brought in a guy who knows how to win. He's won everything all over the world, especially all over Europe, I should say. Yeah, and he's come into Tottenham and they can't compete.
Yeah.
And it just, I think some of the things he was saying were right. It's being run not to win things. It's being run for money. But I do think you're right, as you said, with the manager's comments and everybody's comments who works for that club. You're all meant to be pulling in the same direction from director down to steward. Of we're in this together, through good times and bad. But I do think Daniel Levy's time will be running out with Spurs fans. I know, obviously, they've gone into the new Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, which is really good. Heard some good things about it. But the fans will now be fed up with, well, we've done that. We've paid for that. Our main striker is possibly going elsewhere. We've got no manager again. We've sacked 4 managers in 4 years and not won anything. It's not like Chelsea where they sack a manager every 18 months, but they win something. So it's a tough time to be a Spurs fan, I think. I know they used to win things, didn't they, back in the 70s and the 60s, but they've not won much recently. And
I think it's one League Cup or something in 2007.
Yeah, but it's like for a team that back when they won that, I would have put them as that team who were sort of the best of the rest, and it was their opportunity then to try and capitalise on what was going on and become a big team. Now people say, "Oh, Tottenham are in the Big Six." I don't know if they are. I still would put them as the best of the rest. Yes, they have a big stadium, but they're not pushing on like all the other teams are. They've got, like, you look at your Manchester Cities and your Liverpools, your Chelseas. They're getting exponentially better each year. All right, some have had falling off, same as Arsenal did, but they're rebuilding. They've not dropped off to the point where they've not won anything for 40 years. Do you know what I mean? Or had any real dominance for that long. It's a case where Arsenal, even when you dropped off, you were still winning FA Cups. You were still competing.
Yeah.
You were still competing. It's a hard one, and especially with Harry Kane potentially going. Although Spurs fans would see that as a negative, I think you should capitalise on him in the summer. Get some money in for him. Change the mentality of the club. Bring through. They've got a really good, or some really good youth players. Bring through some of them into the first team who've grown up being Spurs fans, playing for the academy, wanting to get in the first team. Bring that hunger and then complement that with other players. All right, you can't go, we're going to go and compete for the Premier League. But realistically, as a Tottenham supporter, would you be going, if we don't win the Premier League, that's a failure? I don't think so. I think their thing is top 4. If we get in the top 4, that's a successful season. If we get in the top 4 and win a trophy, you can't get any better than that. It doesn't matter what the trophy is, whether it's a Europa League or an FA Cup, a League Cup, whatever it is. We've got to win something. I think they have the ability to do that. But their thing, a bit like Arsenal, is we've got to finish in the top 4. And then they've got to pressure Mr. Levy to spend the money early. He is a businessman, fantastic businessman. I think anyone who argues that he's not, he's an idiot. But football fans don't like it being run as a business. We want to win things. We want to spend the big money. If we, rather than leave it late and save yourself 20 million, spend 20 million more and get him in early and potentially capitalise on that. It's a difficult one, and I understand the frustrations of Spurs fans. And I mean, I think the rest of the league is probably a bad thing that he's gone, because all those players will now step up a little bit. That, I say new manager bounce, but it's a case of, if we don't finish in the top 4, I need to be touting my talent for a top 4 club somewhere across Europe. Some of them I don't think will want to stay if they don't finish in a top 4. I've got to be honest. But yeah, the 4th manager in 4 years. It's not going well,
I think the funny, I say funny in the kind of loosest sense of the word, in terms of as an Arsenal fan over the last few years, we went under the Wenger era where we were consistently in top 4. I think instead of the last season or the last 2 seasons.
Yep.
In his tenure, but we consistently had that, and for us that was kind of like the start of our downfall. Now I know we got to, I think it was like a semi-final in the Europa League and a final with Unai Emery, we got to a final with Unai Emery, and I think it was a semi-final with Mikel Arteta. But even at our worst point, which was last season, I think we've had a 6th and 8th and an 8th. Even at our worst that we've had for 20 odd years, we've still been more successful than Tottenham have.
Yeah.
At our lowest point, we still come away with an FA Cup. We still come away with a Community Shield. Now, obviously, I know that the Community Shield is basically a glorified trophy, but it's still, I would say,
it's still got some prestige behind it.
Yeah. That's what I was just about to say. So I know that what do I call it? The Spurs have won the Audi Cup or whatever fucking trophy it was a couple of years ago, which again is kind of like a pre-season friendly tour. But you're right. The Community Shield has a lot more prestige about it than this cup thing. But yeah, I think that's and sorry, obviously we got a lot of stick from Spurs fans because once again they finished above us last year. They finished above us by a point last year, and it wasn't. I probably sound like a bitter Arsenal fan, but it wasn't the fact that we or they were the better team than us. We just had a fatal blip at the wrong time last season with a loss of Newcastle, loss against Tottenham. And we kind of threw it away, and I think that was kind of like a lesson learned from last year. And obviously, we've stepped up our game massively. We've recruited well, and let's not forget, at the start of the season, Spurs fans were like, "Oh yeah, we've got the best manager. We've won the transfer window. We've made the best signings. We're definitely winning something." And it has come. I know I can't really say anything because we haven't got to the end of the season yet, but I think we're one win away from guaranteeing us Champions League football for next season. So that's my target.
Yep.
Or one of my targets. I know I said possibly challenging for some silverware, but we just haven't been at the races. I'm not sure if, given the position that we're in, has played some factor into that, because obviously we got knocked out of the Europa League a couple of weeks ago. And I know some fans had taken that quite poorly, but at the same time, I think I even mentioned it to you, that given our position, the run that we were in the League Cup, in the FA Cup, and the Europa League, I would sacrifice all of that for the chances of resting our players for playing one fixture a week come the run-in, which we're obviously now coming into. And we need to give ourselves the best opportunity, because we have got some difficult games coming up. We've got Man City, we've got Liverpool, we've got Chelsea all still to play, Newcastle still to play. So we want to give ourselves the best opportunity. So, but yeah, my point there was even at our worst, we've still been more successful than Tottenham have.
Yeah, and they've got, in their opinion, and in some people's opinion, the best striker that's played in the league in a long time. He's potentially going to get the Premier League record. He's now the England all-time goal scorer. And that's Harry Kane. But I think it goes so you can't rely on one guy to do it for you. You've got to do it as a team. But I think, speaking of Harry Kane, obviously England have played in a couple of friendlies. Well, I'll say friendlies. They've been qualifiers, but they're glorified friendlies, aren't they?
Yeah.
And we've won both of them, but he's now the Golden Boot for England. The top goal scorer has overtaken Wayne Rooney. So I think you've got some stats on his actual goals, haven't you?
Yes, I have. So just doing a bit of research, obviously, before the podcast. So Harry Kane currently on 55 goals. He broke the record on Wednesday or Thursday, whatever it was, when we played against Italy. and then obviously exceeded that further yesterday against the Ukraine. So he has scored 55 goals, 18 of which have been penalties.
Yep.
17 goals have been in World Cup qualifiers, 15 goals in European Cup qualifiers, and 6 hat-tricks. There is no denying his quality for as a striker. Obviously, he's won the Golden Boot in the Premier League a few times as well. No question, he is one of the best strikers in the world. However,
Yep.
I still don't rate him. And I know that sounds stupid, and I just he's a quality player. I'll give him that, but I don't get it.
I think he gets away with a lot more because he's Harry Kane, he's England captain. Bit like Messi gets away with things, bit like Ronaldo got away with things. It's that prestigious, oh my God, it's Harry Kane, I can't book him, where he does things that other players will get booked for. I do think he knows where the goal is. I do think he can create it. But for me, he's not the best striker. I think he... for a long time, he never scored in August, didn't he? Every season, couldn't score in August. I don't think he's a bad striker by any means. That's not what I'm saying, but I don't think he's the best. I just think the case where a team refuses to buy another striker. You think how many strikers they did bring in? Berbatov, Keane. Do you know what I mean? Pavlyuchenko, to name a few. Defoe. Harry Kane cost them nothing. They don't want to pay anything to replace him or bring people in to compete with him, and that's why I think he's had the opportunity to stay at that lead the line for Tottenham for so long. Had Tottenham gone, right, do you know what, we're actually going to spend £80 million on Lukaku when Manchester United did or when Chelsea did, would he still be leading the line every week? I don't think so. I think he might. He may be, but I think he would have had a run for his money. Do you know what I mean? There's so many strikers that Tottenham could have signed and were linked with signing and just never did. And I think that's part and parcel of why Daniel Levy doesn't want to sell him, because he knows he's going to have to spend some money to replace him. And if it doesn't work, then you've got to spend some more money and some more money and some more money. So, yeah, I mean, I personally think penalties shouldn't be counted towards your actual goal tally. As such, I think there should be a separate thing for it. I think it should be goals from open play should hold the record rather than penalties, because I think Rooney scored something like 7 penalties compared to Harry Kane's 18. You think that's 11 goals from not having to have been in the right place to have any skill for it. It's a kick it at the goal, and more often than not it goes in. So I mean, it's a good achievement. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, bigger and better things. Speaking of bigger and better things, we predicted the Premier League table before the season. So we're going to have a look at how accurate our predictions are, and we've got a little way to go left in the Premier League. So when we look at it, I think for Mike it's probably backwards, but Manchester City we put top. They're not far off it. They're only 7 points behind, or 8, I don't know, 8 points behind. But we put them first, so we wasn't too far wrong because I was sitting second. 2, 3 and 4. Chelsea, we've got majorly wrong there. Arsenal, I say we've got majorly wrong. We haven't really, because they've gone above, but we've put them in the right sort of area. And Tottenham were fourth, but because of the last couple of games, they've fallen out of that. So I think the top of the table we've done fairly well with, bar one. Liverpool, obviously, I wanted to put further down, and you wasn't convinced. He's like, no. But they are sitting sixth at the minute, so we've got them in the right box, that Europa League box. And Manchester United are contesting with Tottenham for fourth at the minute. Or Manchester United are third, Tottenham are fourth. So we're not too far off with that side of things. West Ham 7th. Whose bright idea was that? Looking at what West Ham spent in the summer, we should have pushed on and be seventh. We're not. That's where we start going majorly wrong, because obviously Brighton we put down in the relegation battle. They're pushing up there. Fulham we put down in the relegation battle. They're pushing up there, although they have been dropping off recently. And what I will say, I think I did say, Fulham will be really good until they're not.
Yep.
Last couple of weeks, they've been imploding. So I think very slowly they're going to start getting drawn back into that mid-table obscurity. I think they've won themselves enough points to not be relegated this season. But it had, from sort of like 12th down in the Premier League, not been absolutely abysmal this year. I think they could have ended up in trouble at the end of the season. But yeah, West Ham are languishing, obviously, down in the relegation zone at a minute. Next, Leicester, another one that we got wrong. Finishing in top half, they've had they started off with loads of injuries. They came back, had a really good spell, playing some really good football, and all of a sudden have dropped off a cliff again. Don't know what's happened to them, but they've spent no money, and I think that's something maybe we overlooked and was being a bit optimistic about them having sold Wesley Fofana. You would have thought they might have put some money back in. They didn't. So I think that's possibly why they're struggling this year. Newcastle, I think that's one that sort of surprised everyone. I think we thought they were going to do well, but I think there was still question marks over, was Eddie Howe the man to take them to the next level? He's obviously doing really well at the minute. Fifth, I think they're not playing as well as they could be. I think they're struggling in some of the matches they shouldn't be. But again, they could drop off by the time they're only 4 or 5 points above 8th, so they're not that far where we've put them. Not that far off of where we did put them. So we could still be reasonably correct with that one. And Crystal Palace we put as 10th. Obviously, we're difficult to beat last year under Patrick Vieira. Have had a bit of a torrid time over the last 10 games or so. I don't think the World Cup did them any favours having that break. He's now been relieved of their duties, and they're sitting 12th. So again, not too bad. I mean, the top half of the table is a bit difficult. I'm sort of trying to defend our choices. It's a bit difficult to predict because there are always one or two teams who do really sort of trump the norm every season. But for the most part, I thought that was a reasonable guess, and I don't think we're that far off, if I'm honest. Obviously, Chelsea and Liverpool have got a bit of a resurgence. Chelsea are playing really good football. Liverpool, again, it just depends on which way the wind's blowing. And then we get into the interesting thing, the bottom half of the table. Now, in real life, there's only 4 points between bottom and 12th. So all of these, I think you could say we're correct in some senses. But Wolves, we put at 11th, they're 13th. Villa are currently 11th, so we was only one place off with that. Southampton are bottom.
Rock bottom.
But they've had a bit of a strange season. They sacked Ralph Hasenhüttl. They brought in Nathan Jones. They've sacked him. And now they're playing really good football again. So I think they're a team, if they stay up, have got real potential because they've got a lot of young players in there. But they need to push on a little bit to meet our expectation. I'm not convinced they will go down. I think it could come down to the last game of the season. But they're still hanging on there at the bottom of the table. Brentford, they are currently sitting 8th, although we put them 14th. And I think they're the team that have pushed on well. They recruited well. Obviously, Thomas Frank does really well at Brentford, and the whole team is having a really good season. So I think we could be forgiven for thinking that they were going to be sort of mid-table obscurity. If I'm totally honest, Brighton are that team that have trumped the norm. I think.
Yep.
They got rid of Graham Potter. Obviously. They've sold a few players. They sold a few players in the summer as well. We thought Chelsea were going to go and raid them for a load. And they've just pushed on. They've actually got stronger since Graham Potter left, which is really, really strange. It's not usually something where someone has such influence over the team that they then go on to even bigger and better things so quickly. Usually it takes a little bit of time to adjust, but they've done it seamlessly. So there, I think the one of the two glaring errors in our predictions being West Ham and Brighton. However, West Ham could still finish in the Europa League spot if we win the Conference League, which we should, theoretically. Everton, I think we're pretty much bang on. We put them. They're currently sitting 15th. We put them 16th. We knew they were going to struggle again under Frank. Sean Dyche has come in and really helped them out. But again, I think we're about right with that one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're going to do much better than where they're at the minute. Nottingham Forest are 16th. We put them 17th. So again, only one place out. Team that has spent a lot of money, brought in a lot of players, a lot of experience. But it's always hard for a team to gel that quickly.
Yep.
Pardon me. Leeds are 14th. We put them being relegated. Had they not sacked Jesse Marsh, I think they would have been in the relegation places still. They had a little bit of a resurgence, had a good couple of games. And they're struggling again. So them being dragged back into that 18th place, I think they're still, for me, one of the favourites to go down. Bournemouth, bang on. We put them 19th, they are 19th. But again, as I said, there's only 4 points between bottom and 12. So anyone could finish in that bottom three. But Bournemouth started off with Scott Parker, sacked him after he said the ball weren't funding the club properly. Gary O'Neill took over and as an interim boss and was doing really, really well until the point they made him full-time boss. And now they've dropped off a cliff again. I think it's hard for Bournemouth to compete at the level. You think that they shouldn't be pushing for the top, but when you think they came up with Nottingham Forest, who have spent a ridiculous amount of money, that's the sort of team they should be competing with to try and finish just outside the relegation zone. So they could do it. They could still stay up, but I don't think so. And Fulham, we put rock bottom. I think some of that was Marco Silva. Some of that was rumours that Mitrovic was going to go. But they've sort of trumped us a little bit. But they are getting worse, as we said. So they'll be dragged a bit closer to our prediction. I mean, is there anything in there that you think, actually, we were justified in thinking that and it's just not worked out? Or how did we overlook something?
For me, I think, and I say this in the most sincere possible way, West Ham, I think, for me, have been the biggest shocks.
Yep.
Or has been the biggest shock, given their performances last year, and I suppose towards the tail end of the year before. They were absolutely phenomenal. Like I've said on so many occasions, they're a bit of a guilty club for me, obviously for family ties and all that business, but it's such a big fall from grace. And I suppose you can kind of put Liverpool and Chelsea into that category as well.
Yeah.
Obviously with the signings and stuff that Chelsea have made, you would expected them to kind of kick on or press on a little bit, but they just can't seem to buy a win at the moment. I know they've had a few new players through the door. So again, just going back to that whole conversation you just mentioned about the time to gel for Nottingham Forest.
Yeah.
It will take them a bit of time. But Liverpool, again, another team that have kind of surprised me a bit. And I know, obviously, we've mentioned they've had some injury problems, and I could have sworn at some point over the course of this season, we've mentioned it a few times on here about Jurgen Klopp possibly being sacked. Yes, it's been a bit of a strange season, obviously, and I'm saying that again in the nicest possible sense, in the fact that we're top. Go back to when we started talking about these predictions. You've already mentioned that for for Arsenal, I think a trophy and top four was targets for us.
Yeah.
And now I know, obviously, we like I mentioned, I think we're one win away from guaranteeing ourselves from Champions League qualification for next season. So that's objective one, and the fact that we're actually in the running for the title as well. It's scary because we haven't been in this sort of position for years. And it's obviously somewhere that we wanted to get back to. I know we've been close a couple of times. Obviously, the year that Leicester won the league, I think we finished second that time. But certainly over the last few years, we've been going through that transition period, and we are now obviously seeing the effects of backing a manager and giving them a bit of time to bring through the team that they want to, make some recruitment. Again, I know there haven't been first choices, but the choices that we have made have been absolutely phenomenal. Trossard has been an absolutely outstanding signing for us in the January transfer window. Jorginho, I think he's one that's surprised a lot of people with how well he's slipped into the Arsenal thing. Now, I think Arteta's got to take a lot of credit for that, but again, I suppose the players have to take some credit for that as well, because we've mentioned it so many times that we don't care, or we're less bothered by the outcome of a fixture, providing that we see the team put in 100% or leave it all on the pitch. And I definitely think that's something that we are seeing a lot of from Arsenal. There seems to be none of this kind of like roll over and just accept what we've got. Mm-hmm. We are trying to push for winners if we're in a losing position or drawing position. Do you know what I mean? So for us, I think we've been a shock in terms of where we are. Not unexpected to be out of or in the top four, because, like I said, I think that was certainly our objectives.
Yeah.
But to be in the position we're in, and there's still time to go. And let's not forget, obviously, Manchester City now have got a game in hand over us. But we've actually got those points on the board. They're guaranteed points for us.
Yeah.
They've got a tough fixture coming up at the weekend against Liverpool. And if they were to lose that game, I think they're currently 8 points behind us. And if we then go, or obviously Leeds come to us and we win that, that's an 11-point gap.
Yeah.
That's mental.
Yeah. Especially this stage of the season, you start getting carried away. But equally, that could work against you, because obviously everyone thinks you've won it and then it's yours to lose rather than yours to win.
Yeah.
I mean, with West Ham thing, I think we said the end of last season that the Europa League campaign was papering over the cracks. But because we didn't buy anyone in January, we had a small squad. I think that the amount of money that we spent and the players that we bought in, I think everyone thought, actually, this is what we need to maintain and take us to that next little level. And I think it's somewhat of the players not wanting to work for Moyes anymore. It's difficult to say, but yeah, I think at the minute we're failing, and we have to stay in the Premier League, and we have to win the Europa Conference League. I think if we don't do both of those things, that's a failure. When you look at the teams that are left in it, we should be winning that competition, and that would then shoot us up the table, a bit like the year Chelsea got in the Champions League or won the Champions League for the first time. They finished 9th. Do you know what I mean? But they still did what they needed to do. Wasn't good in the league, but it was good everywhere else. And you saying about, obviously, Manchester City, Liverpool, I think that's one to add into our predictions, because we do make predictions every week. Obviously, the last round was a couple of weeks ago now, which included Brighton and Grimsby in the FA Cup. If I remember correctly, you actually went for the drumming and I went for the underdog story, in hope that Grimsby would prevail and push on. But I should have gone with my head rather than my heart. But Mike, what were the predictions that we made last time round?
Okay, so we had 3 predictions, as you mentioned. Arsenal versus Crystal Palace was on the Saturday. Brighton versus Grimsby, as you mentioned, which was on Mother's Day, and we also threw your Europa Conference League game in the mix as well. Yep. Because you were due to be playing Manchester City, who were in the FA Cup. Yep. So, just very quickly, Arsenal versus Palace. Again, as you mentioned a little bit earlier on, Patrick Vieira unfortunately got sacked from his position as head coach from Crystal Palace.
Yep.
And I suppose there was this expectation. Obviously, we saw what the damage that Everton did to us when Sean Dyche took over at Everton. And I was kind of a little bit dubious as to how they would perform, but obviously given our position in the league and how well we've been playing, I made a prediction of 4-2 and you went for 3-1. The score was 4-1 in the end, so it's a point each. Brighton versus Grimsby, as you just mentioned, you went for the underdog love story score. You went for 1-0 to Grimsby, and I went 2-1 to Brighton. Absolute pasting from Brighton in that particular fixture, knocking out the lowest opposition or lowest ranked opposition in the FA Cup at that time. So 5-0, 0 points to you, 1 point to me.
I think I did say that if Grimsby didn't win, that Brighton would blow them away. But
yes,
it doesn't count for anything because it only counts on the score. Bloody hell.
Exactly. And then the last game which we had predicted, as I mentioned, was the West Ham Europa Conference League game. You were at home to AEK Larnaca. You went for 3-1 and I went for 2-0. The score was 4-0, so that is 1 point apiece. So the total scores for this week, Ian, you have got 2 and I got 3. And so the season totals as they stand, Ian, you are on 43 points and I am currently sitting on 56. So that trophy, I know there's still a long way to go. We've still got a lot more games to play for, but I'm telling you, mate, that trophy's coming home.
I need to do what I did last season at this point and just get like 9 points in a couple of weeks running, and I'll be all right.
That's it.
Obviously, every week we do make these predictions, so let us know in the comment section over on YouTube what you think will happen in these games. So, Mike, what are this week's games?
So we have Arsenal versus Leeds on Saturday, 3:00 kickoff. West Ham versus Southampton, and as you just mentioned, we are going to throw another one into the mix for the Manchester City versus Liverpool game. So obviously we are the first game of the weekend, so I will start. Obviously, as you mentioned, or as I mentioned, we are currently 8 points at the top of the league at the moment. It's a nice advantage to have, but as always, you don't want to be kind of resting on your laurels and taking our position for granted. It's going to be a tough fixture. I think we only won 1-0. And I think, to be honest, we were quite fortunate in that particular game as well because Leeds absolutely took it to us. And I think it was a goal late on in the game which ended up giving us the win anyway. So I'm expecting more of the same. Leeds, they've had some okay results just recently. In their last 5, they've won 2, drawn 1, 1-2, drawn 1 and lost 3. That's in all competitions. So I think, is the international break going to affect us? Have we got all parties coming back unscathed? Could they pick up any knocks? Do you know what? I think I'm going to be I'm going to go for a 1-0 win to Arsenal in this one, possibly more of the same from
what was that,
last fixture.
1-0 win to Arsenal.
Yep.
I'm going to go a little bit more adventurous than that. I'm going to go 3-0 to Arsenal. I think Leeds are lacking in quality at the minute, and Arsenal seem to be on a bit of a tear. Gabriel Jesus coming back from injury as well, just at the right time to help push on. I think you're going to trump Leeds a little bit. 3-0 for me.
Okay.
And that would then lead on to, obviously, the next fixture, which will be West Ham versus Southampton at the London Stadium. Battle between relegation rivals. So you would say it's a 6-pointer at this point, and I would think that we've got a difficult run of fixtures. We've got 9 games in something like 15 days or something. I read. I don't know if that's exactly correct. No, that can't be right. It's something. It's 9 games in a ridiculous amount of time. And I think Southampton are going to be up for this one more than we are. I think it's one of those, a bit like Everton. If Southampton come out firing quickly, then the fans will start to turn on the club and the players, and that has a dramatic effect on what goes on. I'm going to go here 2-1 victory to the Saints.
That's exactly what I've gone for. Yeah, I mean, obviously they managed to get the draw against Tottenham just before the international break, causing Antonio Conte to have his outrageous outburst. You're right, they are on a bit of a resurgence at the moment, but do I change? Yes, actually, I will change. Just to spice things up a bit. I'm going to go for 2-2.
Ooh, point.
Yeah, I think I do agree with you that Southampton are pushing on a bit. West Ham, they've had some good results recently, but do you now focus all your efforts into the Conference League, or do you at some point have to sacrifice the players that you've got or the squads that you've got to maintain your position in the Premier League? It's a tough one, but yeah, I'll go for 2-2.
Yeah, I'll take a point at this point, but yeah, it's a difficult one to predict. And that leads for the big fixture of the weekend into Manchester City, Liverpool. Now, I think at the beginning of the season, most people would have thought this is a fight for the title. This is going to be the title decider, but far from it. So, what's your take on this game?
My head really wants Liverpool to win this one, or even a draw. I think would be good for all parties, because I think Liverpool actually won the reverse fixture, didn't they? Yeah,
I believe so.
At Anfield. Yeah, do you know what? I'm gonna go. My predictions haven't been too bad this season. I'm gonna go for a 2-2 draw.
Oh, you took the words out of my mouth. That's cheating. I'm going to do the same. I think Manchester City have been a bit blunt this season. Liverpool are starting to come back good, but are defensively weak. And I think they're going to cancel each other out. Do I go for the 2-2 draw still? 3-2 to Manchester City. Just to change it up a little bit. If we get 2-2, if it's 2-2, I'm going to be kicking myself. But I'm just, Manchester City to nick it.
Okay. Well, for my sake, or for Arsenal's sake, I hope I'm right, or even a Liverpool win. But obviously, that's just going to mount the pressure on for the rest of the season. Obviously, as many points as we can get between us and City, the better for us, because, like I said, we have got some difficult games. But I think the fact that some of these teams have still got other competitions that they're in may do us some favours down the line. But like I said, I'm not going to be jumping around in my out of my chair until it becomes mathematically impossible that we can't be caught. At that point, I will believe that we will win the league.
Yeah. Well, we'll wait and see. Have you got any more Premier League news to bring up?
No, nothing from me.
So on that note, then we will leave you with the thought of Roy Hodgson is back at Palace. What is going on with the world? Until next week, I've been Ian.
I've been Mike.
Make sure you're subscribed, and we'll see you very soon.